My apologies, guys.
Okay.
All right, Fort Sumter. Again, my apologies. Fort Sumter, located off the coast of South Carolina. It is a federal fort. It's a federal fort off the coast of South Carolina. Lincoln's pledge, now that he has some executive authority, that he is going to protect and defend federal property in the South. Lincoln is not going to recognize Southern secession. He's not going to ignore it. He knows it's going on, but he's not going to formally recognize the Confederate States of America's right to exist. So it's going to be business as usual. So upon learning of the attack on Fort Sumter, and even the weeks leading up, Lincoln's going to reinforce the fort with supplies, with food, weapons, possibly anticipating an attack. The South perceives this as Lincoln essentially preparing for a conflict. So maybe Lincoln is viewed as the what? He's viewed as the antagonist, he's viewed as the aggressor. To make matters worse, after the attack on Fort Sumter, of which ultimately Major Anderson is forced to abandon the fort, Lincoln's response, he calls up volunteers to form one army. Now, this is not helping because, again, we can't look at all these events as, okay, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. States are seceding, states are against Lincoln, Lincoln's now in office. So these are like layers to an onion here. And we're just peeling back all these different layers, and if you know how to peel an onion, all those peels don't come off nicely. You almost pull a peel off with it, another peel off with it together. So now we want to take some time to look at the strategic resource comparison. Now that we know, right, that war has been declared, the South is being perceived as an aggressor by attacking federal property, Lincoln calling up 70,000 volunteers to fight in all these names: the War for Southern Independence, the War of Northern Aggression, the U.S. Civil War, all these different names that are tagged along with the U.S. Civil War. Let's compare and contrast. Who has the advantages? So let's look at an issue, let's look at an area and say, all right, definitely Southern advantage. There was a Northern advantage. So why don't we look at, let's start with population. So who has the larger pool of resources as far as human capital, human resources to fight in this war, because a draft is instituted. Both sides will utilize conscription. Go ahead. The North. Clearly. All right. I mean, pretty much the election of 1860 showed you that. Now, granted, all right, 4 million slaves in the South at the height of the Civil War were not able to participate in the franchise and vote and things of that nature, nor were they utilized in a combat role. So right there, you can see a strategic disadvantage to the South. They have a labor force that they are not going to equip with weapons for fear of what? For fear of rebellion. So it's logistics, right? It's moving cannons, it's transporting supplies. That's the primary role that slaves will play, for the Confederacy, up until the end, when they get really desperate, right? Until they get really desperate there in 1865. Give me another area. What about, we looked at population. What about the economy? What about the economy? This is going to be, hint, hint, wink, wink. This is going to be huge. This is Lincoln's war weapon. He weaponizes the Northern economy. Let's see how. Go ahead.
Northern industry.
Northern industry. All right. Turning out, you name it, everything. All right. Bullets, guns, cannons, ships, ironclads, you name it. All right. The Northern industrial powerhouse. What else? During the time period of industrialization, what are we building in the North? And there's very few of it in the South, and Lincoln weaponizes it. Go. Railroads. Right? The Iron Horse, right? Do not ignore the impact of transportation as a strategic resource for the North during the Civil War. Absolutely, 100%. What else? Missing a big one. I'll give you a hint. While they were building the railroads, they said, oh, why don't we lay these along the railroad lines? Since we're laying the railroads and we're here anyway, why don't we lay these too? Telegraph lines. Lincoln's ability to communicate with his commanders and his generals by a little tap, tap, tap and a hold, right? By sending that telegraph code across the battlefield. Certainly a strategic advantage for Abraham Lincoln. Railroads, roads, telegraph. What else? What else can we look at as far as who's got the advantage coming in? Right? What about where it's being fought? Where is this conflict being fought? Where's it being fought?
The South.
It's being fought predominantly in the South. Advantage who?
South.
Advantage South, certainly. And it's just like that same strategic advantage that the colonists had over the mighty British Empire. Knowing the land, knowing the terrain, having a very supportive local community, as you have kind of like what? The North coming down, right? Invading, right? They have to come to us. There was an exception. When did Lee go to them? For pretty much the whole war, it's the North going down there. And fighting different campaigns, and Sherman cutting a path of destruction, all right? And his march to the sea, and Savannah and Atlanta are just kind of gutted. What is it? Okay. It's Gettysburg. All right, desperate for supplies, all right, really desperate. You know, no advantage, no goal of the Confederacy to move north, all right, to move north and take over territory. They were concerned about their livelihood moving west and enduring, all right? So that's a good resource comparison, right? Strategic resource comparison. Just certainly note, because of industrialization and the South heavily relying on an agricultural way of life. Now, here's a good one for you. The South had the potential of what tremendous advantage. It didn't work out. It didn't work out because that potential advantage had a conscience. Got it?
I lost it.
You lost it, that's okay.
Aid from Europe.
Aid from Europe. Aid predominantly from Great Britain. But many European nations, as you know by this time, had already emancipated slaves. Right? They are no longer, right, holding slaves. It's the United States that's still, right, the slave holder, right, in the world, as well as other areas. Why would Britain want to? They didn't. But how could this have happened? Go ahead.
Because they faced industrial competition from the north, and
Sure.
the south was their primary trading partner.
Correct. Right? The South's largest trading partner of cotton, right, is going to be Great Britain. But then, it's like I said, Britain gets a conscience. Right? They can't recognize a slave-holding nation, the Confederate States of America, that they saw themselves as. So they find resources of cotton in Egypt and India. Right? So they find their cotton elsewhere. Right? The sun never sat still, pretty much at that time as well, on the British Empire. They still had colonial holdings in Africa and in South Asia. The war strategy. The engagements, see the handout. I'm not going to take time to go over all the major engagements and so forth. Okay? But we know this is a war that claims hundreds of thousands of lives on both sides. It divides the nation, clearly. It divides parties, clearly. It divides families, for goodness sake. So you may want to kind of brush up on some of the social consequences of the war. You cannot ignore the 4 million slaves held in bondage, right, during this conflict as well. And try to answer the question, okay, what happens next? What happens after this war? When this war ends? Just one quick comparison here, or statement. Both sides anticipate a short war. In any major conflict, both sides are going to anticipate a short conflict. But the reason why I put the first battle, Bull Run, it results in a what victory? Who? It's a Confederate victory. It's a Confederate victory. And that's going to say, okay, maybe this war is going to be a little bit longer than what we bargained for. War strategy. Yeah, I'm going to skip over this, but come back to war strategy. What you're going to see here is some irony. A lot of the men who fought alongside each other during the Mexican-American War are going to fight against each other during the Civil War. So young lieutenants, young commanders, young generals, they're going to fight against young infantrymen. They're going to be fighting together in Mexico, right, during the Mexican-American War, but then be fighting against each other during the Civil War. So note that parallel. One of those individuals was a man named Winfield Scott. And he's going to devise a war strategy to fulfill the objective of winning this war. What was it called? the anaconda plan. An anaconda, all right, is a snake. It's a very big snake. How does it kill its prey?
Strength.
Strength. Squeezes it. There is a political cartoon, noted. I think it's been used in the past on the exams, all right? The anaconda cartoon, all right? General Winfield Scott. It's got a three-prong offensive here. What's the objectives? Anaconda plan. 3 parts to it. Go ahead.
Naval blockade.
Okay, first and foremost, naval blockade. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. Check. Done. The second one. Some people oftentimes forget this one. They know the third one, because that's like game, set, match. Done. What's the second part? Go ahead.
Divide the South along the Mississippi.
Very good. Divide the Confederacy in 2 by controlling the Mississippi River. Done. Check. The third part of the Anaconda Plan, and again, this is not going to take place over a matter of weeks. It's going to take place over a matter of years.
Move in on Richmond.
Moving on Richmond, which they do. That famous story of Lincoln actually sitting in Jefferson Davis's chair. I mean, how much better could that get? All right? The president, self-proclaimed, elected president of the Confederacy. I am sitting in his chair right now, and it was only a matter of a couple days, all right, before the surrender takes place at Appomattox Courthouse, and then what? 5 days later, right, the assassination of Lincoln. All right, so there you have your major engagements. That's where I kind of stop there with the actual war itself. And again, that handout is really going to help with some of the engagements. Now, for the duration of the 20 minutes or so that I have remaining, it's a nice little balance. Let's go into Reconstruction. Right? So let's kind of put the Union back together. Right, let's put the Union back together. All right, so I'm just going to throw this all up here at once. All right. End of the Bloody War and Reconstruction. I'll do my best to get us all the way up to the Compromise of 1877. Again, panoramic view here, right? Very much a panoramic view for the sake of time, and also for, not to impede on your own preparation of how you study for this exam. I'm going to give you the skeleton here, and you're going to have to place everything else. Right? You're going to have to place everything else. All right, so we have the war being fought between 1861 and 1865. What's Lincoln's attitude, even while the war is being fought? The war's being fought, people are dying, states have seceded, he's trying to put this mess off. What's his viewpoint? What's his attitude? What's his emotion? Go ahead.
Kindness towards the South.
Kindness to the South. Kindness. He is very lenient, all right? He wants to what? What's Lincoln's objective? What's his objective? Restore the Union. Restoration of the Union. And that was essentially a big part of his campaign. Restore the Union. However that looks, I want to restore the Union. So between those 4 years, with the war being fought and the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, during the war itself, Lincoln is already making plans for Reconstruction. Now, as you prepare, you're going to see Reconstruction. You're going to see Restoration. You're going to see Presidential Reconstruction. You're going to see Radical Republicans, and there's going to be all these different plans. And how do we make sense of them? Ultimately, states will end up coming back to the Union, in some cases, on different plans. Then you have these long holdouts that they hold out way to the end, like Texas or something to that effect. Right? But there were some states like Tennessee. There were some states like Louisiana. Get me back in. We're in. We're back. Because the longer they waited, what was the risk? The longer you waited to rejoin the Union, all right, what was the risk? Go ahead.
The longer it would take to re-elect new officials.
Correct. All right, it's just going to extend the process, and the hoops may become more difficult to jump through. Oh, you want to come back now? You got to do this, and this. You come back earlier, there's not so much of a to-do list to come back. Now, obviously, between these years, and again, I would love to be able to give more time to the Gettysburg Address and the Emancipation Proclamation and so forth. All right? But certainly, what frees the slaves? Does the Gettysburg Address free the slaves?
No.
Does the Emancipation Proclamation free the slaves?
No.
What does?
The
13th Amendment to the Constitution does. All right? So this is where we start to try to jump ahead a little bit into these 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Right? So our plans for Reconstruction: Lincoln versus Johnson versus Congress. as you prepare, go through all the plans. With Lincoln, what was it? The 10% plan, right? 10% of the state's population declare a loyalty oath, right? Former Confederate officials, all sorts of things, extremely lenient. He wants to preserve the Union. The more harsh the terms are, the more bitterness is going to be deep-rooted. And so that's not going to contribute to the restoration of the Union. When we look at Johnson, right? Lincoln's assassination, on April 14th, right? Dies on the 15th, survives overnight, right? Barely, right? Assassinated on the 14th, dies on the 15th, now usher in Andrew Johnson. And restoration, he still wants to take some of the same lenient policies as Lincoln did. But then enter Congress. They throw out the Wade Davis bill. You bring in these radical Republicans, led by who?
Senator Thaddeus Stevens.
Stevens. What do they want to do? These radical Republicans want to do what?
They want free rights for the slaves.
Absolutely.
Freedmen.
And they want to crush the South. Forget this leniency stuff. Look what you put us through for the last 4 years. And so make sure you understand the complexities of the different Reconstruction plans. Then you've got military occupation of the South and the military districts. And only upon what? Did we get to this? Wow, that word again. And another compromise. So we got us in the problem in the first place, and now we're going to compromise our way out of Reconstruction. We'll do a backroom deal over cigars and brandy, all right? And put who in the White House in 1877?
Rutherford B. Hayes.
Hayes, right? Okay. Providing Reconstruction efforts led by and in the South, okay? We'll control it. Let's shift gears there. The Civil War amendments, 13, 14, and 15. One thing to note about constitutional amendments. Transformation takes place when you see them passed in bundles. What was the first bundle of constitutional amendments?
Bill of Rights.
Bill of Rights, well done. First 10. We have 27 amendments to our Constitution. 10 of them were passed by themselves, all right, with the Bill of Rights. Then you got 11, 12. Then you've got 13, 14, 15. 13's what?
Slavery is
Abolishment of slavery, all right. 14th?
Everyone should know.
All persons born or naturalized, all right. 15th?
Universal male suffrage.
Universal male suffrage. Make a connection. Boy, does this put a real wrench in the operation of women's rights advocates for suffrage. Freed black slaves are getting the right to vote before free white women. All right? That was a little bit of an issue there. All right? So there you go with some progressive social history there. So 13, 14, 15. Then what do you have? What comes next? What's the next big bundle? You don't have another constitutional amendment, Mr. Nash, 1913? 16th? All right? So you go, all right, 1860s, and you have a whole time period. Gilded Age, I know you love that. And the Progressive Era, all right? And then you get 16 is what?
Direct election.
Income tax.
I see it twice a month. Income tax, direct election of senators, 18?
Prohibition.
Prohibition, 19?
Women's suffrage.
Suffrage, very good, well done. So note constitutional amendments, right? Many times passed in these bundles, right?
You always
Passed in
get so
bundles,
excited for that
all right? Particularly with the Progressive Era, and obviously for our purposes today. Black codes. Black codes. Ushered in after the Civil War. Also note here the formation of the Ku Klux Klan. Founded by what? Those Confederate officers. The white outfits with the hat and the drape, right? To resemble ghosts of the Civil War past. To intimidate who? Yeah, you want to exercise that right? Okay. Go ahead, you try to exercise that right. So we usher in these black codes, which were what? What were these black codes? What were these local black codes? Designed to do what? Yeah, designed to put obstacles in the way for African Americans, blacks, freed blacks, to exercise their recently won political and economic freedoms. And they were clever about it, right? They were clever about it. As you move ahead, poll taxes, literacy tests. Oh, we're not denying them based upon their skin color. We're denying them because they can't pass this test. Look at how they work the system, right? So these black codes are going to be kind of like the precursor and planting the seeds to what's going to blossom into Jim Crow and segregation laws. to form obstacles, to put obstacles in the way of those trying to exercise. Throw sharecropping in there, throw tenant farming in there as well. Answer the question, what do you do with 4 million emancipated slaves? You tell me, because I don't have an answer. They didn't have an answer. They themselves didn't have an answer. What do they know best? Agriculture. What do they know best? Farming. I can work hard. I can sweat out in the field. So, here you have that tenant farming. Oh yeah, work this land as a freeman, but then you have to obviously what? You have to borrow money to get the tools, right? You're going to have to give me a percentage of the crop back so I can sell it. It's like, it's almost like, wow, I've seen this before. It's deja vu. But I'm not a slave. I'm actually working this land as a freeman. Right? Illiterate, can't read, can't write, many of them. So what do you do with that? And so therefore, certainly pay attention to black codes, segregation policies, Jim Crow acts, all right, that are going to make it ever more difficult for freed slaves, emancipated slaves, free blacks, all right, to participate in Southern society. With the Compromise of 1877, we'll conclude, right, over the next 7-8 minutes with this. You have this birth of what's called the New South. Okay? A New South that the South wants to make look like the Old South, but they know they can't do it like they had it in the years leading up to the Civil War. So they're going to structure Southern society, right, in this New South and what it's going to look like. So as we had the presidential election, right, of 1876, for the purposes, why don't I just pull up the 270 to Win site. Again, 270towin.com, for those of you that just walked in, the website that I've used in the past, gives you a lot of great election data. So here we go. We're going to click up the historical elections timeline. I'm sure Mr. Nash and Ms. Quinn have kind of addressed a lot of these transformative presidencies. Where I need some help here, I can't see the numbers.
You're in the 18. Keep going.
Right there.
There we go. All right. So here's 1876. All right, here's 1876. Hayes Tilden. Okay. There's going to be disputed results. All right. There's going to be disputed results. Let's see. We have the actual. There it is. All right. 185 to 184. All right. 185 to 184. One of those elections, all right, that I'm sure Mr. Nash has told you about, in which the popular vote candidate loses. All right. Loses. The argument was made to this. Right, as Republicans were continuing to control Reconstruction efforts in the South. Right, Democrats want them to leave. Right, and so with the disputed election results, I believe Oregon was one of the states. I think it was Louisiana. All right, maybe Florida as well. There was disputed election results. Right, typically disputed elections. All right, are determined in the House of Representatives. House of Representatives. Rather, right, an agreement is reached. Democrats give up the White House that was for the taking. In response, that radical Reconstruction efforts would end and military Reconstruction would end in the Deep South. And this is how we get a Hayes presidency. So how we got ourselves into this problem in the first place, with slavery being, who's the author? Founding Brothers. Ellis, Joseph Ellis, all right? Kind of like the ghost at the banquet, he calls it. You know, the elephant in the room. Right? Everybody knows that it's there, but you don't talk about it. They compromise their way into the whole slavery dispute and slavery issue. Takes a war for 11 states to break away, for 600,000 to die, for a president to be assassinated. To get us to the point where we just simply compromise our way. And what's the connection that we can make? All right, moving forward. What results has, go ahead, if this were like an essay. We gave you the pre, what came before. Here's the during. What's going to come after? Can you build out 3 or 4 decades in this time period? The turn of the 18th and 19th century, or 19th and 20th centuries, excuse me? What can you say?
Well, it's a continuation of Jim Crow laws, which potentially is the civil rights movement.
Okay, throw your Supreme Court cases in there, right? Throw Plessy in there. Okay. Separate but equal doctrine. What else? Build out 4 decades or so. What's coming after?
We do another 4 decades, we get to the 1960s civil rights movement.
That may be a stretch, for your readers. Say, okay, they jumped, 80 years. That's all right, right? But definitely, right? You are definitely planting seeds, right? And this is precursor, right? This is precursor. What else?
You have the forgettable presidents.
Ah, you got the forgettable presidents. Absolutely. All right. What else? What else are we going through after this? Let me get tied back to this somehow.
You have segregated armies until Truman and the Vietnam War.
Vietnam?
Korea.
There you go. Well done. Well done. Right? So be able to make the connections. All right? Be able to make the connections. With the 5 minutes that remain, are there any topics that you want me to go on a little bit? Do we want to go emancipation? What exactly did the Emancipation Proclamation kind of spell out? Anything for the 1850s that we need to review, whether it's Underground Railroad, whether it's Harriet Beecher Stowe, whether it's Dred Scott. I'll try to maybe, go ahead.
Can you just name some causes of the Civil War?
Name
I
some?
know slavery.
Sure, let's do that. That's a great question, all right? Immediately, right, your eye is drawn to slavery. And I think that's the answer. I mean, states' rights, all right? States' rights. Some people throw out the states' rights argument, all right? Keep in mind, this is a very growing movement, all right? Contract, compact theories and so forth of government. States' rights, slavery, recognition of a leader in Lincoln who's going to drastically transform our way of life, if he has his way. But remember, Lincoln at first was not this passionate abolitionist. Sure, he questioned and disputed slavery on the grounds of morality, but he wasn't going to go through the South and abolish slavery immediately. He said that. I have no intentions, again, I'm butchering this, it's not verbatim, of influencing or affecting slavery where it currently exists. However, moving west, his sights were set on moving west. And I'm sure most likely in the process, it would return back to, addressing it in the South. What else? So that's a great question. States' rights advocates, slavery. I mean, slavery's the big issue, all right? We can't, did it take a war? It did. It took a war. Go ahead.
Tariff.
Tariffs, right? Keep in mind, this is a great, do you need this still or no? Can I take this out now? No problem.
I'm just filming, it's all yours.
One of the things that I teach, hopefully it comes up so that you guys can see it. Here's American society, all right? Call it unified, all right? Call it unified at the time. At some point, and the point about the tariff, all right? We start to diverge, all right? And we start to form almost like this identity crisis. Like who are we? We've got states that are free, states that are slave. We've got industry in the north, and commerce and finance and banking and shipping, and we've got slavery in the south, and cotton and agriculture and tobacco and indigo, all this stuff going on. So at some point, you start to have divergent social, political, and economic points of view. And that's established, right? Ironically enough, error of good feelings. Does the American system pass Congress? Henry Clay's little plan? To unify North and South with roads, bridges, canals, and turnpikes, and tariffs, and things like that? Some elements pass, but they see, wait a minute, we in the South are not going to pay for roads and canals in the North. That's not going to happen. If they want a road or a canal in their state should pay for it. They're not going to use federal tax dollars, all right? They're not going to pay for that. So I think if you look, 1820s, all right? 1820s. Look at the election of, you start to see the sectional divide in presidential elections. 24, corrupt bargain. 28, clearly, right? Quincy Adams gets New England, a couple of New England, and it's all Jackson the rest of the way. So you start to see, and I'm telling you, start to recognize those presidential elections and the sectional divide. So that's how I would answer that question. What caused the Civil War? You have a word in antebellum that describes a time period of decades leading up to the U.S. Civil War. They gave it its own word, for goodness sake. It's not, oh, these are the decades leading up to the Civil War. No, this is antebellum America. They gave it a word. So, I like this. All right? I like this. And you know who said it? John C. Calhoun. I In the 1820s, he already recognized this. Remember, he was the vice president under Jackson, South Carolina Exposition and Protest, all right, blasting, all right, tariff laws and things of that nature. Anything else? You guys have been a great audience. You guys have been a great audience. One more, go ahead.
So what was Johnson's view? Did he also agree with the 10%?
He did. Well, he wanted to continue the leniency policies of Lincoln. And it's kind of like many presidents, right? Lyndon Johnson, what did he do? Right? He saw Kennedy's vision, and he wanted to certainly live that out in the remaining 2 years of what would have been, right, John F. Kennedy's presidency. You know, so yes, Johnson, but here's the thing. With Johnson, he's going to have to go, all right, with a midterm election, in which Congress drastically changes, and you pull in those Republicans that want to drastically alter, all right, Reconstruction efforts and not be so lenient, all right? No, that's okay. I know you guys have to come in. All right? All right, I tell you what, do you have any other personal, one more?
I'm sorry.
Sure.
In the election of 1860, besides Lincoln and Douglas, who were the other two?
Lincoln, Douglas, Breckinridge, and John C. Bell. Breckinridge is a Southern Democrat, all for slavery. Reinforce slavery where it is, and let it expand. Douglas, popular sovereignty. Let the people out in the Western territories decide what to do with slavery. Lincoln's the free soiler, all right? No slavery, no popular sovereignty, all right? It's going to be free soil. And John C. Bell, what's interesting about John C. Bell, all right? I think he actually wins more electoral votes than Stephen Douglas. He's all about just restoration of the Union. I don't care what it is. Yes, slavery, no slavery. I want to preserve the Union. And whatever the Constitution is saying about slavery, right, that's what I'm going to reinforce. That's another thing to mention in the 1850s. All these parties popping up. Whigs, right? Whigs are the core of the Republican Party. Become free soilers, Republicans, right? Southern Democrats break away from Northern Democrats, right? Because here their champion and Stephen Douglas is talking free soil. That's the potential that it can become slave or free. We don't want to risk flip a coin on free or slave. We want slave. Southern Democrats break away. Any others? All right? Go ahead.
Was Johnson as equally unpopular with the South as Lincoln was?
Good question. Was Johnson as equally, because his plans in the early are going to mirror those of Lincoln, I would say yes, because he does believe in franchise. He does believe in extending, right? But again, his is also going to be restoration. Notice the difference of the words. Reconstruction, Johnson throws out this word restoration, all right? Also research the Wade Davis bill. That's the more aggressive. They went up to 50% loyalty oath. Lincoln wanted 10%. Wade Davis bill, 50% loyalty oath. All right. I got 2 more classes to teach over at the Grays Academy. All right? So